I'm super happy to welcome to the show Congressman Benny Thompson of Mississippi. Representative Thompson has been in Congress for 3 decades. He's the ranking member of the Homeland Security Committee, and he has served as chair to the Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the Capitol. Under his leadership, the January 6th Committee conducted more than 1,000 interviews, examined hundreds of thousands of records, and presented a clear and damning case to the American public of the events leading up to the insurrection. Congressman, Happy New Year. Let me start off by wishing you that. And I really appreciate you being here because the January 6th Committee and its work was such a huge part of 2023. And it was an incredible amount of work that you did. I want to just get your thoughts. Given where we started and all of the work that the committee has done, how does it feel? What are your thoughts seeing Donald Trump indicted and facing 91 different felony counts?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Charles. Let me just be very clear. Speaker Pelosi had no choice other than to establish this select committee. We first tried to do a committee pattern after the 9/11 Commission that would not have members of Congress on it or anything. The Republican leadership in the Senate didn't go with it. Speaker Pelosi came back, put together a resolution for the Select Committee, and would make it bipartisan. Well, obviously you can't put the likes of Banks and Jordan and other people on that committee and expect it to do any work. Speaker Pelosi said, no, we're just trying to make sure this never happens again. Leader McCarthy, Speaker McCarthy, got mad, took his Republicans off the committee. And so ultimately, Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger sat on the committee as Republicans. We worked 18 months. You laid the predicate in terms of how many people we interviewed. But more importantly, we were looking at the facts and circumstances that brought about January 6th. Unfortunately, so much of those facts led us to believe that crimes were committed. And so we were not a criminal body. So we referred it at the end of our report to the special counsel and the Department of Justice. And what you see playing out now is part and parcel a lot of the work that the Select Committee did.
We ain't gonna say crimes were committed. That's almost like mistakes were made. You all were very clear about not only that you believe that crimes were committed, but who in fact committed the crimes. One of the things, Congressman, that I thought was brilliant in your approach was pushing to have these hearings aired on prime time in front of the country so that they could have a sense of transparency about what was going on. Do you feel like that ultimately got to the American public and moved the needle and that they understood the gravity of the moment in which we are in?
Oh, no question about it. We made a decision early on to tell our story before the American people. If we had done the traditional hearings, it would not have gotten the impact that we received. Our witnesses were stellar witnesses. A majority of those witnesses were Republicans. They were secretaries of state. They were basically card-carrying Republicans, but they were patriots. And they didn't want Donald Trump and his gang to do to this country what they had seen with their own eyes. So clearly, we saw it. The American public saw it. And that's why the numbers at each hearing kept going up and up. And so what's playing out in Georgia, what's playing out in the District of Columbia, what's playing out in Florida, all that information, a good bunch of it, Charles, we picked up in the course of our interview. And so we were not, as you say, an investigative body with that kind of power. But I think as a committee, we had a duty to refer anything that we saw that was illegal to the proper authorities. And that's what we did.
Congressman, one thing that people may not always consider, it's in the minds of a segment of America, but not enough Americans. Donald Trump occupies a really specific and potent place in the very fragile conversation about race in America. And if you look at the key figures who are working to hold Donald Trump accountable and to protect American democracy, many of those people are people of color. Many of them are black folks. We can start with the first person to actually criminally indict Donald Trump, Alvin Bragg. He's oftentimes overlooked. We've got New York Attorney General Letitia James. We've got Fulton County DA Fonnie Willis. We've got the federal judge Tanya Chutkan in the January 6th case. And you yourself, Congressman Thompson, I think it is important to highlight that given the fact that black people have not always been well served by American democracy, how many of us are continuing to put their lives and safety literally on the line to do the legwork necessary to protect it? Can you comment on that?
Well, there's no question about it, Charles. Black people, by and large, believe in democracy. They believe in the rule of law. And what they want to do is for the government to work for everyone, especially black people, because for the majority of us, that's our only real hope. The only reason I'm in Congress today is because of the Voting Rights Act. That was legislation passed in Congress giving people of color in certain parts of the country an equal opportunity to vote. And so it's those things. Many of our children attend colleges and universities because of this government. So for black people in this country who are very patriotic, many of them, as you know, went to war, came back, were treated as second-class citizens, but they went to war. So black people, by and large, believe in the rule of law. And so what they saw, and a lot of us, myself included, was a president of the United States stoking the flames of insurrection on January 6th. He encouraged people to come to the Capitol, put members of Congress, staff, law enforcement persons' lives at risk. We are a better country than that. And I think black people understand that. They see the path that's being painted by Donald Trump and his acolytes. But believe me, I heard you talk to my colleague, Jim Clyburn. Sure, the polls are where they are right now, but I'm convinced with the proper message and the proper messengers, we will be victorious next election. We have some work to do, but you know, there's no choice in my mind between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. As an African American, I believe in this country. I don't believe in dictatorships. I don't believe in anything other than the rule of law. What we discovered on the work of our committee, we had someone in the White House who did everything he could to circumvent the rule of law. And that's not who we are. Our oath of office tell us we have to make sure that people prevail. And any instance where it does not, we have to stop it. So I stand on the work of our committee. We celebrate 3 years of work in about 5 days, 6 days. So we're here. We stand on that report we issued, and every indictment that's come about came about because of the work of our committee.
Congressman Benny Thompson, Democrat of Mississippi, you might be a Kappa man, but you are all right with me. Happy New Year, and thank you for joining me.